Some NFL records will never be broken. Not because players aren't good enough, but because the league has evolved so dramatically that the conditions which created these records simply don't exist anymore. Michael Strahan's 22.5 sacks in a season, Dick Knight Train Lane's 14 interceptions as a rookie, Adrian Peterson's 296 rushing yards in a single game, or Brett Favre's 297 consecutive starts. These aren't just impressive stats, they're historical artifacts from different eras of football. Today, I'm breaking down the most unbreakable records in NFL history and explaining exactly why modern players, despite being more athletic and skilled than ever, will likely never surpass these marks. These records tell the story of how football has transformed over the decades and why some achievements from the past remain untouchable. Most sacks in a single season. Michael Strahan's 22.5 sacks in 2001 broke Mark Gastineau's record of 22 from 1984. While there's some debate about how Strahan got his record-breaking half sack, Brett Favre appeared to fall down intentionally in Week 17. The real story is about the era in which this record was set. In 2001, offensive holding was called much less frequently than it is today. Pass rushers faced significantly more physical contact from offensive linemen who could get away with techniques that would draw flags in the modern NFL. Strahan was dealing with constant grabbing, holding, and borderline tackling on every pass rush attempt. What makes this record particularly impressive is that Strahan achieved it in just 16 games. When TJ Watt tied the record in 2021 with 22.5 sacks, he had the benefit of a 17-game season. The extra game represents a slight increase in opportunities, making Strahan's per-game average even more remarkable. Modern pass rushers benefit from stricter enforcement of holding penalties, better conditioning programs, and more sophisticated pass rushing techniques. However, they also face more complex offensive schemes designed specifically to neutralize elite pass rushers. The combination of rule changes and strategic evolution makes Strahan's record increasingly difficult to surpass. Most interceptions in a single season. Dick Knight Train Lane intercepted 14 passes during his rookie season in 1952, a record that becomes even more impressive when you consider he did it in just 12 games while working full-time at an aircraft factory. Lane's background is remarkable. He had never played college football and literally walked into the Los Angeles Rams training camp asking for a tryout. Within months, he was setting a record that has stood for over 70 years. The key to understanding this record lies in the rules of 1952. Defensive backs could make contact with receivers throughout their routes. There was no 5-yard contact rule, no illegal contact penalties, and no defenseless receiver protections. Lane's aggressive style of coverage, which included significant physical contact at the line of scrimmage, was not only legal but encouraged. Lane's technique involved disrupting receivers' routes through physical contact, causing quarterbacks to throw inaccurate passes that he could intercept. This approach was highly effective in an era when passing offenses were less sophisticated, and quarterbacks had fewer options when their primary receivers were covered. Today's defensive backs operate under completely different rules. The 5-yard contact rule, implemented in 1978, fundamentally changed how defensive backs can play. Today's defenders must rely more on technique, positioning, and anticipation rather than physical disruption. While modern defensive backs are more athletic and technically skilled, they're constrained by rules that make Lane's aggressive style impossible to replicate. Most rushing yards in one game. On November 4, 2007, Adrian Peterson rushed for 296 yards against the San Diego Chargers, breaking Tony Dorsett's single-game record that had stood for 30 years. Peterson accomplished this feat as a rookie, in just his 8th NFL game, while playing on a torn meniscus. Peterson carried the ball 30 times and averaged 9.9 yards per carry, demonstrating both durability and explosive ability. What makes this record particularly significant is the context in which it was achieved. In 2007, the NFL defense was in a transitional period, adapting to increasingly pass-heavy offenses by becoming smaller and faster. This defensive evolution created opportunities for elite running backs like Peterson. Teams were prioritizing speed and coverage ability over traditional run-stopping power, leaving gaps that exceptional runners could exploit. Peterson's combination of size, speed, and vision was perfectly suited to take advantage of these defensive adjustments. The NFL defense has evolved to better balance run defense with pass coverage. Today's defensive coordinators employ more sophisticated gap control schemes, utilize lighter boxes more effectively, and have better athletes at every level. The specialization of modern defense makes it much harder for running backs to find the explosive running lanes that Peterson exploited. Additionally, teams rarely give running backs 30 carries in a single game. The emphasis on player health, combined with the financial investment teams make in their running backs, has led to more conservative usage patterns. Teams now prefer to distribute carries among multiple backs to reduce injury risk and maintain effectiveness throughout the season. Most consecutive starts for a quarterback. Brett Favre started 297 consecutive games from September 27, 1992 to December 5, 2010, an 18-season streak that encompassed regular season and playoff games. This record represents not just durability, but a completely different approach to player health and game participation. Favre played through injuries that would sideline today's quarterbacks for weeks or months. He started games with broken bones, severe concussions, torn muscles, and other significant injuries. His approach to pain management and injury recovery was characteristic of his era, when playing through pain was considered essential to maintaining roster spots. The rules protecting quarterbacks were minimal during much of Favre's career. Today's roughing the passer penalties, sliding protections, and targeting rules didn't exist or weren't consistently enforced. Favre absorbed hits that would result in ejections and suspensions in today's NFL, yet continued to start games week after week. Today, quarterback protection extends beyond rule changes to include advanced medical care, better understanding of concussion protocols, and more sophisticated injury prevention programs. Quarterbacks benefit from improved equipment, better field conditions, and medical staffs that prioritize long-term health over short-term availability. The financial structure of NFL contracts also influences playing decisions. Guaranteed money and long-term security allow quarterbacks to prioritize health without risking their careers. Favre played in an era when missing games could mean losing your starting position permanently, creating pressure to play through injuries that would be considered unacceptable risks today. These records represent more than just impressive statistics. They're windows into how dramatically the NFL has evolved. The next group of records shows us just how different the game used to be, and why some achievements from football's past will likely never be matched. Most touchdowns thrown in a single quarter. On October 18, 2009, Tom Brady threw 5 touchdown passes in the second quarter against the Tennessee Titans. In just 15 minutes of game time, Brady completed 6 of 7 passes for 152 yards and those 5 touchdowns, leading the Patriots to score on 5 consecutive possessions. This performance came during the peak of the Patriots' offensive dominance, when Brady had elite weapons like Randy Moss and Wes Welker, plus an offensive line that provided exceptional protection. The Titans' defense was caught off guard by the Patriots' no-huddle tempo and precision execution. What made this record possible was a combination of factors that rarely align in modern football. The Titans were playing primarily man coverage without adequate safety help, essentially creating one-on-one matchups that favored the Patriots' superior skill position players. Their defensive adjustments were too slow to counter the Patriots' rapid-fire offensive approach. Today, NFL defenses are far more sophisticated in their ability to make in-game adjustments. Defensive coordinators now have extensive preparation for high-tempo offenses, better communication systems, and more flexible personnel packages. The kind of sustained breakdown that allowed Brady's 5-touchdown quarter is much less likely to occur with today's defensive preparation and coaching. Additionally, teams are more conservative about keeping starters in games during lopsided situations. While Brady continued throwing because the Patriots wanted to make a statement, most contemporary coaches would pull their starting quarterback to avoid injury risk once a comfortable lead is established. Longest pick six return. Ed Reed's 106-yard interception return for a touchdown against the Philadelphia Eagles on November 7, 2004, represents the longest possible play in NFL football. Reed caught the ball at his own goal line and returned it the entire length of the field, plus 7 yards into the end zone. This record is mathematically unbreakable unless the NFL changes field dimensions. Reed intercepted the pass at the deepest possible point and returned it as far as the rules allow. The physical impossibility of going farther than 106 yards makes this record unique among NFL achievements. Beyond the mathematical certainty, Reed's record showcases a rare combination of skills that's increasingly uncommon in football. Reed was 6 feet 1 inch and 200 pounds, ran a 4.3-second 40-yard dash, and possessed exceptional football intelligence. He could cover receivers like a cornerback while having the size and speed to return interceptions for touchdowns. Today, safeties tend to be more specialized. They're either larger players focused on run support and coverage in the box, or smaller players optimized for deep coverage and pass defense. The versatile skill set that Reed possessed, elite coverage ability combined with return specialist speed, is rarely found in a single player today. Reed's record also benefited from the Eagles' aggressive offensive approach. Philadelphia was 7-1 and heading to the Super Bowl that season, but their willingness to throw deep into coverage created the opportunity for Reed's historic return. Modern offenses are more conservative about taking such risks, especially in situations where field position favors the defense. Longest punt return, Robert Bailey. Robert Bailey's 103-yard punt return touchdown against the New Orleans Saints on October 23, 1994, represents another record that's extremely difficult to break due to both field dimensions and modern strategic approaches. Bailey caught the punt at his own 3-yard line and returned it untouched for a touchdown. The Saints coverage team failed to contain him, allowing Bailey to find a seam up the left sideline and outrun every defender. The return required not just speed, but also exceptional field vision and the Saints' complete coverage breakdown. This record is nearly unbreakable because of how punt coverage has evolved. In 1994, special teams coverage was often handled by backup players and non-specialists. Teams would send their fastest available players downfield without the sophisticated coordination and technique that characterizes modern punt coverage. Today's punt coverage is highly specialized. Teams employ players whose primary job is covering punts, and they study film extensively to understand returners' tendencies and preferred routes. The coordination and angles used by modern coverage teams make it extremely unlikely that a returner could go 103 yards without being touched. Modern strategic approaches also work against long punt returns. Teams rarely punt from positions that would allow a 103-yard return. When facing 4th down near their own goal line, most teams will take a safety rather than punt and risk giving up a touchdown. The Saints' decision to punt from their own 20-yard line, giving Bailey maximum field to work with, represents the kind of strategic choice that's uncommon in today's NFL. Most penalties in a single season. The Oakland Raiders were flagged for 163 penalties during the 2011 season, accumulating 1,358 penalty yards, nearly 3/4 of a mile of infractions. This represents more than 10 penalties per game over a 16-game season. The Raiders' penalty total reflected both their organizational culture and coaching approach under Hugh Jackson. The team prioritized aggressive play and maintained the just-win baby mentality associated with Al Davis, sometimes at the expense of discipline and technique. This record included a wide variety of infractions: holding, false starts, unsportsmanlike conduct, personal fouls, and procedural penalties. The Raiders had players who struggled with emotional control and coaches who emphasized attitude over precision, creating an environment where penalties were frequent. Modern NFL teams invest heavily in coaching staff specifically focused on reducing penalties. Position coaches spend significant time teaching proper technique to avoid holding and false start penalties. Teams also employ sports psychologists and other specialists to help players maintain emotional control and avoid unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. The professionalization of NFL coaching has made the Raiders' 163 penalty season increasingly unlikely. Teams understand that penalties directly correlate with the losing games, and they've developed systematic approaches to minimize infractions. The combination of better coaching, more sophisticated preparation, and greater emphasis on discipline makes it extremely difficult for any team to accumulate penalties at the rate the 2011 Raiders achieved. These records represent more than just statistical achievements. They're evidence of how much the NFL has transformed over the decades. Understanding why these records are unbreakable helps us appreciate both the players who set them and how the modern game has evolved. The records we've examined today exist as historical artifacts from different eras of NFL football. Each one reflects the rules, strategies, and cultural approaches of its time, and understanding why they're unbreakable helps us appreciate how the game has evolved. Night Train Lane's 14 interceptions were possible because defensive backs could use physical techniques that are now illegal. Brett Favre's 297 consecutive starts occurred when quarterback protection was minimal and playing through injuries was expected rather than discouraged. Adrian Peterson's 296 rushing yards came during a transitional period when defenses were adapting to pass-heavy offenses. The NFL's evolution has been driven by multiple factors: player safety concerns, strategic innovation, rule changes, and the professionalization of coaching and medical care. These changes have generally made the game safer and more competitive, but they've also made certain types of individual achievements much more difficult to accomplish. Modern players are more athletic, better trained, and more skilled than their predecessors in many ways. However, they operate within a system that's more controlled, more strategic, and more focused on team success rather than individual records. The specialization of today's football means that players rarely have the opportunities to accumulate stats at the rates that created these unbreakable records. These records serve as reminders of football's rich history and the different challenges players faced in earlier eras. While players today may never break these specific records, they continue to push the boundaries of what's possible within the current framework of the game. The evolution of the NFL continues, and future rule changes or strategic innovations might create new types of records that seem unbreakable to us today. Understanding the historical context of these achievements helps us appreciate both the players who accomplished them and the ongoing development of professional football. These records tell the story of how football has evolved from a raw, physical game into the sophisticated, strategic sport we know today. If you found these historical insights fascinating, hit that like button and let me know in the comments which NFL record surprised you the most. Subscribe for more deep dives into NFL history and the stories behind the game's most remarkable achievements.